On this special edition of the podcast, we're going to talk to a survivor of the most literal example of a hot zone seen in 2018, the California campfire.
This is the Hot Zone. Engaging with the news in a whole new way, international war correspondent Chuck Holton brings insight into areas of crisis and lets you help those affected.
Hi folks, the 2018 Camp Fire was the deadliest and most destructive wildfire in California history. At least 86 people died in the blaze, making it the deadliest fire of the last century as well. The fire completely destroyed the town of Paradise, California, as it stormed across 153,000 acres over 17 days, consuming more than 18,000 homes and other structures in the process. It was the USA and the world's most costliest natural disaster in 2018. And today, we get to hear from a survivor of that fire whose home was one of those that was lost. Take a listen. So we got Logan Wilson. Logan, last time you and I talked was just, maybe a couple of weeks after you lost your home in the campfire, right?
It was days, I believe, after we lost our home.
Wow.
Yeah,
amazing.
It was right after.
Amazing. Well, I've got my Padawan learner here, Mark Tomlett. And so would you just describe to him very quickly what happened and how it went?
Yeah, absolutely. Mark, it was a crazy time. It was a fire that I've never seen a fire burn or start that fast ever. It was at, probably 6:30 in the morning when I could see the first smoke, and by 10 o'clock, of people trying to evacuate. It was extremely scary, and it burned the entire town of Paradise, which has about 30,000 people. The entire town is largely gone. We lost our home. It was one of the biggest. Now they're saying it's the most expensive natural disaster in 2018, and so it just happened right here in our little community. My grandparents lost their home. We lost our home, and 30,000 other people are left without homes right now too. So it was pretty scary, a wild experience, and something that. It's really difficult to prepare for, but here we are, and happy to be here to tell the story about it. So,
what was going through you when you got that phone call that you need to get out of your house right now and you're gonna die if you don't?
Well, it's interesting because I actually was the one that made that phone call more to my grandparents because I was in a spot where even though my house burned, I got to watch the fire develop miles away, and it ended up coming and traveling down to my house. But it was definitely interesting for me when I thought it was about 8:30 in the morning when I called my grandpa, who lived, right in Paradise, where the fire basically, the center of the fire. And I could hear basically an ambulance and a loudspeaker coming from his phone of people telling them it's time to evacuate, time to leave now. And so I was much more worried for him because he was in the center of it then, and there were still miles for the fire to travel before it got to my house. But I was certainly scared and nervous for them because my grandma also needs my grandpa to help her get around. And so it was scary knowing that they were in an emergency situation and the road was blocked, so I couldn't get up there to help them.
And they had to leave so fast that they didn't even get to take anything with them, right?
No, they were able to basically get their car keys. He forgot his cell phone. They had a little suitcase that was packed that did have some important documents and, some really anything. They were at the point where by the time my grandpa was able to get my grandma out of bed and into the car, they watched their house burn as they were driving away. Oh. And so they got stuck. There were flames all around them. They had to drive over burning logs. They could feel the heat radiating in on them. So they have kind of one of those war stories that you hear of barely making it out. But my grandpa, he was a firefighter for his career, and so he's a retired firefighter. So I think he might have felt right at home, and has, the instincts to help get out of there. And so it was, it's a blessing to have him with us today because we didn't know for a good 8 to 9 hours that we didn't hear from him. And then finally reunited. So that was huge.
Isn't it crazy how dependent we've become on cellular phones, and when somebody leaves one behind, it's like they died. You just got,
yeah.
What happened, especially in a situation like that. What did the cell network go down while all that was happening?
There were definitely complaints about it being clogged. Definitely calls couldn't always be made, but there was, from my experience, it wasn't, defunct, and it didn't go down completely, but it definitely, there was complaints of it, especially in the aftermath and the following day. Some emergency personnel, there was, some complaints with Verizon or AT&T, whatever it might have been. But it was an issue, but it didn't completely cease.
Wow.
So,
what are you asking me about his sons?
What do your sons think about all this? I mean, you guys, where are you guys living right now? That's my first question.
Well, thank you for that. We were fortunate enough to find another house that we can rent. It's right in Chico, which is local for us. Our kids go to school in Chico, and so we were some of the most fortunate to be able to basically find a home locally now. So we are safe and secure there, and that feels great. But my boys, they're 6, 8, and 10, and so it's been a radical change for them.
Yeah.
They're awesome, and they're handling it like champs. There's no doubt about it. But they miss their home. They miss their backyard. They miss their rooms, and they're each dealing with a little bit different. And it's interesting because they've indicated their friends almost treat them a little bit differently now. At school, just because I think they're one of the victims or one of the people who lost their homes. And so it's, people are just a little bit unsure of how to handle the situation, which is warranted, but our kids are resilient. They are, they're loved. They love each other. And this is talk about, this is one of those life lessons that money can't buy.
That's really amazing. What is Paradise like today? What is it there now? It's gone, right?
It's the easiest way to describe it is it's like a bomb went off. It is complete and utter destruction. There are there's a few businesses that are untouched, and they were largely businesses that had huge asphalt parking lots around them. Mm-hmm. And so there's a couple of gas stations that have opened back up. There's a few different grocery stores, or that have kind of become little grocery stores to help, because people can get back in there now, and everybody's sifting through the ashes and searching for keepsakes that may have been spared. And so there's quite a lot of traffic up there and tons of emergency personnel, but they're still working to restore any sort of power. There's been no removal, like we can't even get in to clean up the ashes from our house yet to start the rebuild process. So it's been almost 90 days and we still, can't even touch the property.
Unbelievable. Jeez. So if you had a feeling that was going to happen again to you, or if you could go back and do it over again, how would you better prepare for this? Aside from like installing a giant fire hose over the top of your house or something. But
well, let's start with that. A giant fire hose over the top of the house is a great place to start. Good question, and something that we've thought about and talked about quite a lot as a family. And the first thing, and this might be overplayed or overdone, but the first thing to always do is check your insurance. Make sure you have insurance, and that goes across the board. If that's going to be life insurance or auto insurance or business insurance, homeowners, I think that's the easiest place to start, and to make sure that you have a solid policy there. But then in the midst of the emergency, I would keep my gun safe in the garage next time and not in a spot that has a 2-story, 2 stories to collapse on it, because that was rough. We had a fireproof gun safe that didn't survive. So we had some keepsakes and important things in there that the fire just burned a hole right through the gun safe. So, but it seems like in the garage it would have been safer. And we talked about having plans for your pets. If you can't get back home, to have a neighbor or some plan who maybe has a key or access to get into the house to remove your pets. But we've talked about and have had plans as a family in the past at making sure that we know what's important, that we know where our hard drives are spared. We have our big gun safe, but we also have a small mobile safe that has all of our passports and important documents that we can just grab. That helped. We have, I had a chance to be in the house for a couple of minutes, and I grabbed some things that I knew were important to my boys and to my wife. That included our hard drive and some of the things that we've acquired traveling and some souvenirs. But it's a wild circumstance, and there's a lot of things that I didn't grab, you guys, because I assumed our house would be standing the next day. And I think if there's one piece of advice in the middle of all this of what to do, is really plan like your house is not going to survive. and then deal with the work and the cleanup and putting everything away later. But I was figuring the fire's so far away from our place, we're going to be okay. And so I only grabbed the bare minimum, which was great and it was good. But I didn't plan like the house was going to burn. And I would say definitely do that.
Wow. So the people that you know out in the area, how many of them have lost their homes? Do you know anybody that's have you heard of people that have died? I know that. What's the death toll up to now? It's like hundreds, right?
Well, I believe it's 86. Okay. 86 or 87 is the direct death toll. And there's actually a memorial along the highway where there's 86 or 87 crosses for each of those people, and that was direct from the fire, and it may have risen over the hundreds from people in the hospital afterwards, but directly, remains found in the fire is just at that 86 or 87 number. Wow. But I mean the landscape of our entire community of Chico is completely different, because Paradise it wasn't quite a suburb, but we could call it a suburb of Chico that had 30,000+ people, and Chico has 90,000 people. And so now everybody who lived in Paradise and the region has now basically moved into Chico and the surrounding areas because they don't have homes. People are living with grandparents or aunts and uncles in 2-bedroom apartments or in mobile homes, and the stress is high. The traffic has changed a lot. I mean, it's the entire community is different because life has changed significably.
What can people do to help? I'm sure that there's been. Well, first, tell me what kind of help have you seen come into the community, and what can people do to help if they want to continue that?
Boy, it's been incredible, the amount of help and the aid that's come into the community. Given that we're a national disaster, FEMA has stepped in, which comes into, there's the United Way and the Cal Fire organization. I mean, there's tons of state and national resources, but also, folks that the Billy Graham team has been here, and there's tons of churches that have stepped up in incredible ways, providing emergency medical care and medical aid and some mental health aid for a lot of folks who needed special help in that capacity. It's been unbelievable. Our kids received bikes and backpacks and just all sorts of amazing gifts that the community has stepped in and filled the gap for us in some great ways. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing is what I told people and have been telling people is wait until February, March, when we're going to wake up on a cold, rainy morning and the disaster is still going to be here. Mm-hmm. We're still going to be cramped into a home that we weren't planning on living in, and the community is still going to be going through this disaster. And so there are some great organizations out there. The North Valley Community Foundation is one. Local churches in the area have stepped up huge and continue to provide resources to the victims and the fire victims. And so it is a long-term effort and a long-term recovery process.
Yeah. So I read your article about Thanksgiving, and I thought it was fantastic. Just reiterate out of that, what are the biggest lessons that this has taught you just about life?
Yeah, I said this is one of those experiences that money can't buy, right? And it's taught us a lot about perspective and what's important. And it's taught us a lot about being honest with ourselves. I think having gone through this right in the middle of the holiday season, right? It happened, we had Thanksgiving and then Christmas and then New Year's. And there's a lot of expectation that we should be happy all the time in those times, or that because we survived, we should be thankful. And we are. But it also doesn't mean that we can't take the time to grieve and be honest about the loss. And I think a lot of us have survivor's guilt. I think a lot of us that maybe have insurance, there's an element of survivor's guilt because we're always concerned about people who are less off than us, which is a great perspective. And it's really important to be thankful for the good things. But I think there's an element or a group of folks who are choosing not to deal with the true grief and the true devastation because it's hard. It's hard to be sad, and it's hard to grieve the loss, and it's hard to be honest about that. We don't like to feel grief or feel sad. And I know I don't, but this has taught me that it's an okay process, and we all do it differently. And that's where if it's my friends, my grandparents, my wife, or my kids, or me, we all grieve differently, but it's a very important part of the process. And to not feel, or just because we're expected to be happy or thankful, it's good to be honest about what we're going through.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, your mind really can't digest the trauma that you've been through until you allow yourself to feel those emotions and to let it manifest itself in whatever way it decides to manifest. And it's just you can't plan for that. You can't figure out ahead of time how your brain is going to deal with that stuff. You just have to work your way through it. But I have learned, at least myself, whenever I've been to very traumatic, like the earthquake in Haiti, for example, that was very traumatic just to see. That it is helpful to tell the story, and the more you can tell the story, the more it sort of helps get that out of your mind and helps your mind order it and put it in perspective. So that's great. Well, we're out of time. Thank you very much, Logan. It's really fantastic, and I'm excited to get to share this with our listeners. I hope that we can have you on again on NRA TV, and so we'll be in touch.
Great. Hey, appreciate it. Thanks, guys. Good to meet you, Mark. Thank you.
The Hot Zone is produced by Amy Holton and Livefire Media. Copyright 2019.